In this section, what I'd like to do is cover an overview of all the component parts that we're going to be using, the load module, C# user classes, and some of the ways in which they actually work. So let's have a look at the load module first. This was designed to enable segments of VBScript code, such as functions and classes, to be stored in separate files and loaded at runtime. So as the Syspro VBScript code started to run, if it hit the load module function, it would look in the base VBScript VBS modules directory and load the file named in the load module function. And this allowed developers to create code libraries or standard code so that they weren't having to rewrite the same bits of code over and over and over again in their scripting. And as I said earlier on, the modules are typically stored in the work VBScript VBS modules directory. One thing that's important about this directory is that it is automatically self-healed to the Syspro server. So as people develop stuff on clients and stored things into this directory, Syspro is clever enough to say, aha, I'll copy it back to the server, and therefore it's available for everybody else to use. So what we're going to be doing is replacing these VBScript modules with what we call C# class libraries. So let's have a quick look at the C# class library. They compile to what Windows calls .dll files. We've seen these in the previous course when we had to link to references and things like that. The DLLs, or these class libraries, can be referenced in the C# scripting environment, and we covered that in the previous course. And one of the things that we have to make decisions on is how we're going to deploy these. It's all very well just sort of writing these things, but you still got to get them out onto your system. So you could use Syspro's self-healing files, and these are those. So if you put a DLL in base managed assemblies, which is actually quite a good place to put them, and that's what we'll be using, then they will get self-healed to the server, and then from the server out to other clients. You could put them into work VBScript VBS modules. It's a little bit counterintuitive to put C# into something VBS modules, but there we go. And then base settings app designer is also another directory that self-heals itself as well, and you may decide to store them in there. One option, other option you've got is deploying using app designer projects, but if you do that, then don't forget you've got to do that on each client. Or you could build your own deployment solution using Visual Studio, things like that. So there are a number of ways, a number of decisions that you'll have to make as you sort of design the way that you want to deploy your own special DLLs. So just as a recap from the previous course, there were 3 types of references used by App Designer. Just remember that it was a project reference tab up here that we saw in App Designer. And when you first start up with a blank App Designer, you get these blue links to these DLLs. These are the common references. They're included automatically by App Designer in all applications. Without these, C# scripting engine will not work. So you can't delete them and you can't change them. There are some global references. And if you add a link to a DLL, possibly like this employee DLL right at the top here, and you mark it as a global, then this DLL will be included automatically in every single app that you automatically create. So the advantage here is that you may well create a generic Syspro Utilities DLL that you want in every single one of your apps, because it's got a load of classes in it that are very, very useful. So there's one way of doing it. And when they are flagged as global references, the code is actually stored in Syspro DB and a table called ADM script references. And then finally, you've got application level references, where you may decide to say, well, I don't actually want a global reference, or I actually want to be able to link directly to a DLL from this particular app. So there's a variety of ways in which you can actually do it. So hopefully that's a quick resume on that. We will be covering this a little bit later on, because in our demonstrations, we're clearly going to be building a DLL. We've got to reference it and then use it in our demo. So don't worry too much at this stage. So what I'd like to do now is move on and just show you a demonstration of a VBScript app using load modules, just to remind you of how it actually all works. Okay, so we're back in App Designer, and I just want to quickly run through a little demo. This is a VBScript app to show you how the load module works. So we have a form, we've got two fields in it, first name, last name, got a couple of buttons up here that when we press them will run different parts of the code. So let's go and have a quick look at the code. Here we go, option explicit, which is fairly standard. Those of you who've seen previous courses will recognize my style, number of constants, describing buttons and things like that. The bit that I wanted to show you was this load module here. So what it's basically, it's an internal function that Syspro understands. And basically what it's saying is, please go and look for that file name in work, VBScripts, VBS modules, and insert the code here. And that's actually what it will do. Let's have a quick look further down on initialization. We're just pre-populating our form, and then we've got a couple of buttons on here. When I press run code, it's simply going to pick up those names and just do a very, very simple message box. We're not using anything in the person.class. But in the next one, where I say use a person class, what we're actually doing is we're setting a variable to be equivalent to a new person class. I am setting two properties of that, and then we're actually saying say hello. So the second button is actually using something called a person class, but as you see, that code is not in this script at all, because it's actually in here. And if we have a quick look at the code itself, it's a very, very simple class. We define a class as person, some internal variables, initial what happens when we actually create a new version or new instance of it, and then a series of variables, first name, last name, and finally a method that says hello, first name, last name. So it's clearly different from what I've got here, which is your name is X number of characters long. So let's just quickly run that, and we can actually see what's actually going on. Exit that, and we will run this code. Okay, so here's our little code. It's pre-populated our first name and last name, and if we press this button, it's just basically picking up these two fields and banging up a message box and saying that the name is 13 characters long, which is fine. Very, very simple stuff. But when we press use person code, it's actually using that class that we had in cls_person.vbs. It's populated the first name and last name properties, and then I have invoked a say hello method. So you can see that in fact the code is completely separate from my VBScript, and that's what the load module function was all about. And what we're going to be doing is replicating that in our C# class. In the next section, what we're going to be doing is building a C# class library and start to convert our VBScript modules and link them into our C# scripting. So I'll see you there.